This isn't a podcast on labeling product marketing. This is a podcast for product marketing managers who feel misunderstood internally.
Because building slide decks and writing copy is not all that we do.
So are today's product marketers actually marketers?
Happy Friday, everybody. We got another episode of We're Not Marketers. And it's a special one because it's first episode where I can say I'm a daddy and not get in trouble by HR. So this is an awesome day. And not only because of that, we also have the wonderful Clara Smyth on with the Misfits today. And we've got a whole bunch to talk about. So I want to do some quick intros. If you're not familiar with the show, I'm Eric Holland, the Franken marketer of the group. I'll toss it over to Zach.
Eric, thanks so much. This is Zach. I'm not the sales water boy. I always keep on taking Jack.
Oh, you are the water boy.
Yeah. I am the water boy.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I am the water. Keeping everybody hydrated for the next one pager that got it right here. So I'm going to pass it over to Gab as well.
You're providing the water for the upcoming Super Bowl.
If they let me on the field.
Exactly. Gab Bujo, sales deck intern. As always, I just do sales deck until I die.
Yes. And we're all dead here. So it's proof that sales decks will kill you. But hey, we've got a special guest, like I said, Clara Smyth.
I'll just be really frank. I call myself a deck dork. I haven't even introduced myself, but that's my nickname.
Wait, did you say a deck dork?
Yeah, that's me right here.
Oh,
is that
that's our first.
Is that self-imposed or?
Yeah, self-sarcasm too, just calling it as it is, where I live and breathe.
Oh, I love that. The deck dork, Clara Smyth, is on the show with us today. And if you guys aren't familiar, I actually break it down when I talk to my fiance as she's the mom of CI. And she's got all these little children, right? And you may know a few of them, but I call her the mom of CI. And currently she's with Clue. Love Clue. Also part of them right now. So no bias here on the show, but we do. Oh, we got the coffee and compete right there. And before she come into Clue, Clara has definitely been a big voice in the industry. You may have seen her at Slack. Before that, she was in the finance world with NetSuite. I'll toss it to you, Clara, and give people any other color you'd like to add.
Thank you so much, Gab, Zach, and Eric for having me today. Hi, everybody. My name is Clara Smyth. And just like Eric started off the show, I'm definitely a misfit. I have had a very interesting career over the past 10 to 12 years of finding my way into competitive intelligence, finding my way into marketing, kicking and screaming because I never wanted to be in marketing in the first place, but also coming to terms with understanding the role that CI and marketing and all departments play in beating your competition day in and day out. I love that you call me a mom because I constantly want to raise people up in the industry and break down the secrecy of CI. There's always been this lock it down and hide it. And I have a lot of moms, like secret moms who've raised me up, but don't want to be known. And I definitely want to break that down and raise up the next generation of CI practitioners.
Oh, I love it. I'm one of your sons. So
I'm honored.
I'm glad. I wouldn't want another compete mom in my whole life. And we have one big burning question that we like to ask all of our guests. And Gab, we like to give him the microphone for the honor. So go ahead, bud.
Thank you. Clara, are product marketers actually marketers? Why or why not?
Absolutely not. That would be my hardcore real stance that they're not marketers. Everybody's doing the victory dance right here. Eric's coming. Let's go. And I'm biased because I have that competitive intelligence and competitive enablement view of product marketing. For example, I came from Slack about a year ago and my title, no joke, had a hyphen in it. And it was Senior Product Marketing Manager - Competitive Intelligence, right? And so the classic thinking is because you create content, you should be in marketing, right? That's the 101 logic that I've had bosses tell me in the past. But I definitely like to challenge that because competitive intelligence and product marketing is not only used and needed by the whole organization, but if it's selfish facing, it's less effective. It has to be selfless and it has to go beyond its own walls. and actually have OKRs and KPIs beyond just the classic marketing KPIs. And so that would be my hot response of why product marketers and why CI and CE professionals are not marketers. It's because their soul is to the organization and not to the department.
What are the KPIs that are not being captured in marketing that you feel that is unique to CI?
Yeah. So for me, I've always bet my entire career, Zach, on CI for Rev Gen roles, which is how I've saved my job time and time again. And so you can, of course, add a target there if you're comfortable. Amount of revenue influenced by competitive support, whether high touch or at scale through competitive content. Many ways you can break that up. There's also additional levers like product roadmap features accelerated, for examples, or number of product briefs created, or number of presentations done for exec suites, right? I've done that before as well. And so there's softer and harder metrics depending on what you're comfortable with, your maturity, and most importantly, the state and nature of your organization.
I love this. Is it something that you decided to implement for yourself just to make sure you could protect and secure your role ultimately? Or is it more that you really wanted to show value, so you decided to really find some specific pillars where you could show, hey, this is how much I influence revenue in that org at that specific point in time?
I think it could be both, Gab, right? It could be a little bit of both, right? Wanting to protect myself and also wanting to showcase value and competitiveness against my peers and within the organization. So I would say a couple jobs ago, it was definitely coming from a protective stance. I had started my career in actually product. And so product had the budget to hire a competitive intelligence professional. And they leaned on me as the enterprise demand gen marketer who knew the industry really well. And then I flipped to become a competitive intelligence practitioner under the product department. And then, ironically, because I was creating content and wanting to go beyond product, marketing scooped me up, right? But for me, my soul was always to the organization. And to answer your question, when I started working with sales, I began to keep everybody else honest who needed competitive intelligence across the organization. And so it wasn't just about me and my metrics and my personality and everything that I bring to the table, but it was actually around how do we all close business together and create something I call a board deck pack that includes both tactical and strategic competitive intelligence.
It almost sounds like you're describing like a corporate version of Goldilocks and Three Bears, where you were at product and it was like, oh, this is too hot. And now you went into marketing, so this is too cold. And now it's sales. It sounds like it was just right to be with sales. Is that what we're hearing here?
Yeah, Zach, that's a really cute reference. I love that. And also like the mama bear, Eric, I think that all comes
There we go.
We're going to write a book by the time we're done with this conversation here. I like the direction we're going so far.
Absolutely.
We'll
To read by everybody.
Claire, I'm a little curious because I've never heard that before. Like, product marketing is their intent is to be selfless. And you said like your soul is for the company. Unpack that a little bit more. Like, when did you start using that? I really like it. Obviously, there's going to be a post on my LinkedIn over the next week or so that talks about that approach, your view of selfish KPIs for your specific department versus like really looking at the business and rallying the troops and making sure everyone's goals are met. Where'd that come from and how long have you been using it?
Yeah, I would say I've termed it just for you all today. So this is hot off the press. However, it's been deep-seated through corporate PTSD. So that's a little bit about me. I mean, there's always win stories and also loss stories. I'm making a double entendre about win-loss, but also in your personal career, there's things that you'll die on the hill for, and there's other things that you'll let pass. And for me, working with sales was always something that I wanted to die on the hill for. And for me, I always wanted to be humbled by what sales did and what they said and how our buyers kept that organization honest. And to your point, Eric, I think if you're very selfish facing of, hey, I need competitive intelligence for my release, or hey, I need competitive intelligence for my product roadmap, it'll never be cleaned, calibrated, or contextualized across the organization. And that for me is where I had seriously moved towards sales. And at what point during my career actually reported into sales leadership as like a semi-sales engineer, as a value-added function within the sales organization. And the reason why that was the case was we had to be kept honest by sellers and buyers in order to be more effective on the board level and more effective in the exec suite. Because I've had execs who are like, if you come in here and talk about a SWOT or a Porter's 5-force analysis or whatever the case is, I'm going to laugh at you. I'm going to laugh you out of the room. And the reason why is because my butt is on the line in terms of the board. And I also want to know, why are we winning or losing in the field? Is competitive intelligence and certification scaled? And is everybody ready with what that one elevator pitch is against the competition company-wide?
Dang.
And
you dropped the 3 C's. And you dropped the 3 C's on us. Did you make that up too?
I did, but I think it has to do with Clara. And Clara means clear and bright. So I always try to keep things like straight and to the punch. And so maybe it's the C's, also something that we'll start up today.
All right. It's Friday. Our minds are flowing nicely, it sounds. She's dropping her little Clara-isms on us just out of nowhere. All right. So I got a pretty big question for you. So have you been in a situation where you've had that ideal structure for CI and how it's built and how it lives? And if not, what does your structure look like and how would you implement it?
Yeah, Eric, I'm so glad you bring this up. And caveat here, my answer, as much as I want to make it like the answer, it's going to be different for every organization. And I can see people's eyes rolling like far out in every state and every country in the world. Come on, Clara, you're not giving me a clear answer. But when I've gone to competitive intelligence and also product marketing conferences out there, it's always been split. There's never a clear, definitive response. And they've even done polls live in the room and surveys scaled out to hundreds of compete practitioners. And it's always been split around, we report into product, we report into sales, we report into marketing, and then we report into strategy. So there's typically those 4 big buckets there. And to your point, for me, I always found such a home with sales, because if I could test my differentiation, if I could test my new positioning and my feature function comparisons and my latest elevator pitches with live deals today, I'll be that much stronger at the next sales QBR, or I'll be that much stronger at the next sales kickoff, or I'll be that much more humbled around what didn't work, so I could come back and enroll people in that mutual success. Versus if I came in an ivory tower and said, I only work in strategy, I only work up there, I think I would be less effective. And there's this common talk of like strategy versus tactical and competitive intelligence. And I firmly believe that you have to have both. And I welcome you to ask that to anybody on your show around, where do you find your soul? Where does your soul sit within the organization? Who do you answer to? And do you find yourself more strategic or tactical?
Clara, a clarifying question really quick is that it feels like when competitive intel enters the marketing conversation, it feels like there's this magic phrase we have to tell salespeople that if we say this phrase, it will dispel every preconceived notion about what they think about our competitor and have them running towards us. And as a former seller myself, like I've disagreed in many instances. It's more than that. And I'm just curious, from your like experience with working with the competitive intel, like what is a misconception you generally run into when you are working in product marketing that you're like, I've got the mic now, you've got the open stage, you like, this is your chance to clarify. What is that general misconception that people have with, or product marketers have with competitive intel that needs to be clarified at this moment now?
Yeah, I would say if it's a side of the desk type of job, if it's your 10th bullet point in your job description, there's never a way that you're going to do it really well. And what I found is that typically in those roles, and I'm not pointing fingers on anybody, but in those roles, it's typically self-facing, right? Or it's self-oriented around the deliverables. It's not necessarily for the organization. I have a quick story to tell you, Zach, around, I remember working with one rep and he was asking for an external facing competitive marketing deliverable. He was like, hey, if you give me the perfect feature function chart, I'm going to win this deal. And I was like, okay, this was early on in my career. I'm like, okay, I can support your deal. Let's go. I can add that to my resume as deals supported and revenue influenced, right? And so I was like, how many competitors are in this amazing feature function chart? And he said 6. And I died on the spot. And what do you think I did? I actually made that feature function and I shipped it to the sales rep. I was really excited about it, but I did frame it that it wasn't perfect. And there were some caveats and there was some intel gaps. And he ended up losing the deal, right? You probably could see that coming a mile away. And the reason why was because for me, I firmly believe that the sales rep, and I wonder what you think about this, Zach, the sales representative or the solution engineer, they bring the differentiation in terms of their style, their knowledge, their ability to deposition the competition. And of course, silver bullets help. Of course, a battle card helps, but it's also in their behavior in terms of how strong are they as a competitive seller. And so there's the intel and the content, but there's also the behavior and the change and what does it take to actually build rapport with a buyer. Are you faster and closer to your customers than your competition? Are you sprinting in line with their event of urgency? That's a whole book that I could totally write on too.
Yeah, I like what you said there too, because I think just from like my selling experience, is that, and you're hitting on it, Clara, is that like when you can articulate the problem better than your prospect and customer, it builds that inherent trust and knowing your audience deeply. Like when I was working in like ed tech, it was a very segmented like space. There were so many different tools, especially if you're talking like reading comprehension. And when I was talking with a English department head, they were like, "Oh, I want to use turnitin.com to help improve our students' writing." And it's like, well, like Turnitin is used for plagiarism. I'm curious, like, have you found plagiarism to be the problem? They're like, actually, no, that's not been the problem. And I think that's one example of how competitive intel helped me as a rep of giving me insight of this is how someone would use this product versus this product too. So I think that's where I really loved competitive intel when I was a rep, and something like I always love to see when I'm in product marketing today.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, especially around the scale of competitive intelligence, it comes back to newsletters, right? Knowing that you have I call it the beat on the street of what's happening now. And for anybody listening, these are my top 3 things that I would include in every single competitive intelligence newsletter. It's what's changed in the market or what's changed in our deliverables, right? Those are very much connected. It's win-loss stories because there's so much FOMO around, hey, how did Gab close that deal? And I lost that last deal, right? How did he close it at a premium and I had to discount like crazy, right? So there's that FOMO with win-loss stories that I love to play psychologically against rep. Don't kill me, don't get angry at me, but I do think that there's FOMO in win-loss to understand what was that secret sauce that was unlocked by that rep. And then the third thing is rumor on the street. That's where I get humble. That's where I ask for help. That's where I say, hey, we're having early feedback from our external win-loss interviews, or we're hearing early feedback on our conversational intelligence tool, or you know what, this really isn't landing. And that's for me where I ask for help. And I say, hey, this is a culture of compete. This is an organization where we all want to beat the competition and your ears are closer to the street than mine are sometimes. And so that call for help at the bottom always kept me agile and with it in terms of what's right and what's wrong and what they can stake their deal on and what's not.
I really love the idea of a newsletter, an internal newsletter. And I think Andy said the same thing as well. That's how we created like that culture of CI. You said something that I want to go back to a little bit earlier, that if you have that CI bullet point on your job title as a PMM, chances are you're only going to half-ass it and not be able to go through all of the way. If right now on the pod, there's a founding PMM listening to the episode, what do you think they should do in that case? Do you think that there's maybe a caveat or a way when you can build a part of a successful CI program and then ultimately later down the road, either becoming or transforming yourself into a CI expert and having someone else covering the PMM role? Or do you think that at the perfect place, you really should be someone full-time just creating and building the process?
Yeah. Thank you for keeping me grounded there, because I joke there's a CEO in my career who said, Clara, you come in with a sledgehammer, but you need to come in with an ice pick sometimes. So I think this podcast, I was coming in with a sledgehammer, but happy to breadcrumb this out.
I disagree. I'm a sledgehammer guy. Just come on. Either way, you're going to break it.
Yeah. We have Thor's hammer, right? We're coming in hot, creating echoes throughout the world. Okay, corny analogy is done. To answer your question, though, Gab, I would say start with the little things. I think a newsletter is a very great deliverable. You can keep it short, you can keep it tight. You don't have to have those 3 sections. just to show that somebody in the organization is looking at the market. And then naturally people will raise their hand, right? You'll be able to create a tiger team, an extended team. So it's not all on you to create content. I've worked amazingly with incredible sales engineers and top sales reps who want to pay it forward, as well as people in strategy, analyst relations, other PMMs. And so when they see one person beginning to raise their hand, oftentimes there'll be a swarm in the organization that you can then begin to divvy up work for. So it's not 100% on you as a PMM. I would also say that typically in companies, we have, like within Clue, I do a lot of consulting and advisory across Clue's customer base and also around prospects that are looking at Clue. And when we look at the maturity and the modeling of how large organizations are, how many employees they have versus what is the relationship with the number of competitive intelligence professionals, there is absolutely a connection. So typically I see like when an organization hits 300 to 500 employees, there tends to be one dedicated person on CI. Now, of course, this is going to look different across PLG and different types of company and different industries. But to answer your question, once your company hits like 300 to 500, then your sales rep number will go up. Then the need to get more differentiated adds more pressure, especially if you begin to join into a very crowded market. So I would say if you're a PMM, do what you can. There's tons of free templates out there. There's tons of advisory and motions. You can even hit me up. I have a lot of templates and happy to have coffee chats with anybody around where to start as well. And then lean on that SWAT or that tiger team internally to really manage the build of the program as well, and then begin to make a case around why to invest and compete. I was working with a customer just last week, and the leadership changed up where the compete team was reporting into, and they were questioning, why should we even invest and compete? And so we've built out a dedicated deck around why now and why invest and compete today, and what's your opportunity cost of waiting another week, another month, another quarter to actually have a dedicated head.
What does investing in compete mean? Does it mean just like hiring more compete people? Does it mean like buying more Gartner reports? I'm curious. What does that investment look like in the organization?
Buying stocks.
Buying stocks. Yeah, exactly. To answer your question, Zach, I would say that there's many different looks of what that could be perceived as. So I would say there tends to be an intel sourcing budget. Where do we want to get new intel from? Whether that's a conversational intelligence tool, whether that's an analyst report, whether that's a win-loss agency, or whether that's different types of compete research agencies as well. That tends to be a line item. There's a line item for software to scale competitive intelligence out there. And then there tends to be one for a headcount. And different organizations will invest at different things at different times. But to your point, it's how do we really move the needle around revenue generated support for competitive deals? Like, what would it mean if every single rep in the company closed one more deal? What would that take? It's a secret sauce every organization has to unlock. But I would say in those three buckets.
And Clara, what I would say is, quick story for everyone. I came into the compete world because my former sales leader was adamant that we got some battle cards against Dropbox, shout out Zach, Box, and Google Drive, and led my way into finding out that you didn't just have to have everything live in an Excel spreadsheet. Then I got to learn that there's actually a practice of competitive enablement, and that led me into win-loss. And it was really interesting, and I'm starting to think about it as playing sports my whole life, is like when you finish a game, you're either going to win or you're going to lose. And if you want to kiss your sister, you're going to tie. But what happens at any of those things, right? If you win that game,
are we gonna just like let that go unchecked? Kiss your sister. You got to clarify that. Like,
yeah, you've never heard that phrase. A tie is like kiss.
I'm just thinking Alabama. That's it.
Wow.
I've never heard that.
Well, I can guarantee you, our awesome listeners know exactly what that phrase is like. But yeah, it's like getting a kiss is nice, but not when you're kissing your sister. So it's just like a tie. You get that feeling in your stomach where you're like, I could have won, but I didn't lose either. So whatever. But back to the real.
I'm glad we got that clarified.
Back to the real meat of this. I look at it as very simple. The good teams who win are looking at game film, right? You need to know why you're winning. You need to call out those things. You need to make sure that the people who weren't doing so well during that win are doing better next time. And the same thing on the losses. You're not just going to lose a game and say, oh, we lost. Let's not see why we lost. Let's not improve. Let's not focus on the things that we did well, even though we lost. And I've now found that compete is such a mature, honestly, necessity. And we even do it on our pod. We referenced it the other day when we were talking about positioning and all that stuff. And I firmly believe that once you have that capacity, whatever your budget is, whatever you feel like it fits in your strategy, carve out that compete budget, whether it's a tool, it's a head count, sourcing, or all of the above. I've definitely matured into a PMM who absolutely loves and respects what CI does, and personally think that a lot of PMMs don't have that part of the engine going because, again, like you said, it's their 10th thing on their checklist. Curious with all that, if you have any thoughts, but more particularly, I want to know from I've only been in this for about 2 years, but where have you seen the maturity of space evolve over the last, let's say, 8 to 10 throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. First off, really funny acronym. I'm still laughing about it. I hope all of our listeners are laughing about it too. Zach, you always joke that you said Clara, and I was like, yep, clarified. We totally clarified that. I'm just going to make it a thing too.
My clarify going to be the new phrase of this podcast now.
Let me clarify something real quick. I have never kissed my sister, so clear that up.
Thank you. That was the
I'm
question
I'm glad.
we're all wondering.
And don't you dare edit this out to say otherwise.
I've definitely seen that competitive intelligence roles have exploded in the past 10 years. It went from back of the office, secrecy, hidden in strategy, doing market forecasting and TAM analysis I would say in the early 2000s, based on my POV. I could be proven wrong by the next expert in CI. To in the 2010s, it definitely boomed in terms of what does that look like for rev gen roles. And now we hit the 2020s, and then you have the rise of AI, you have the automation, you have the investment in the industry too. You have people coming out and sharing what does good CI look like more so than ever before, because you're taking the secrecy out of it. And there are so many people in the industry that you'll never know, Eric. You'll never know. You'll never know who they are. You'll never be able to meet them. And that's because they're definitely old school. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's how they grew up and the conditioning that they went through and also what works for them. And so I have deep respect for those people that you'll never know, who I'm sure are listening to this today.
Going back to the story you mentioned earlier where you had the sales rep come to you and say, hey, we need this like one pager. And it's one pagers for a lot of like reps and organizations. It's like, hey, Clara, this is our way to differentiate ourselves. We need these assets to go out the door. And I think this is a similar feeling that we, many product marketers feel, is that getting these requests. And we've had a few guests already, Clara, that say like, if you get that request, figure out how to deliver on that, because that's another way of how to build that internal influence. But it sounds like with that example you shared, you're like, hey, I did this, I delivered on that, but it didn't move the needle forward. So based off of what you know today now, if you could go back in time and give that advice to that early eager Clara that wanted to make that impact, how should more product marketers handle internal requests that are like drop the dime, that are like, this is urgent, we need this from you? How do you handle that, and all the while still like being mindful to the key KPIs, as you mentioned before, like influencing that revenue?
Thank you, Zach, for keeping me honest and bringing back to the storytelling. I want to drop as many stories and quick tidbits and nuggets as possible to the listeners here. So the advice that I would give to younger Clara in my career would have been to not create that and create something a little bit more differentiated. Because think about that buyer who's asking 6 different SaaS companies for the same exact thing and pitting them against each other, right? That is just creating a lot more confusion. And then your competitive tone gets very confused as well in terms of, are you that person to give me the wrong intelligence? So to answer your question, I would go back to the size of the deal. I would go back to the rev gen threatening competitors, right? Who is really eating your lunch? There's typically a handful, like not more than 3 or 4. And those would be tier 1. I would ruthlessly prioritize tier 1. And when I get a hand that would come up, the ankle biters of the world, I would say, look, like I review these on an annual or biannual basis in terms of how that hits our core marketing deliverables. If it's not on the list, we can assess that based on bandwidth. Or maybe you want to partner with me in creating that. That seems like it's a burn for you. How can you and I create that perhaps together? Or how can the Tiger team create that together? But I have my core tier of competitors that I'm going after. What does my matrix look like? And there's different types of matrices, actually. There's competitive, like rev gen type threatening matrix. And then you have your ankle biter matrix, you have your product threat, and perhaps your strategy matrix as well. So now I'm going in deep, but that's what I would say to earlier Clara of the world, which is make sure that it's in your top tier of competitors and the deliverables align with that. And then most importantly, enroll that in creating ankle biter type deliverables and make sure that it's constantly focused on the customer and not the competitor.
Yeah, you dropped the mic once again. I'm like, I'm at a loss for words right here. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thanks for the great question.
Yo, Clara, what's your favorite food?
My favorite food. Wow, I love the pivot, Eric. We need we need something to relieve the heat here. I think the perfect answer to this would be some milk because I dropped some spicy takes, but for real.
Yo, fun fact, milk actually makes it spicier. Like it keeps the, yeah. So milk, soda, and beer. Those three things.
I think we're going to have a spice off, Eric. We're going to have,
maybe hot ones will bring us on for an episode.
Because they're really dying to know if product marketers are marketers.
Yeah, right.
They have celebrities on, but they might as well have Clara on.
Absolutely.
That's true. That's facts.
Hot soup, hot ramen, all the hot dumplings. Why not bring it all on, right?
Ooh, so that's your favorite. That's your favorites right there.
So I tend to lean towards non-American cuisine. I don't know. I just have a bias for food that I don't know how to cook at home. And so some of the core elements that would break it down would definitely be ramen, soup dumplings. I've been on the record that I have just a constant appetite for the best soup dumplings in America. So if anybody wants to keep me honest, send them my way. And I would say overall, just very unique food. I went to Japan and just tried an amazing assortment of raw sushi. And I love being mind blown in terms of the food environment. So overall, I would say definitely ramen, anything in soup form. And overall, I'm a big dessert nerd as well. So matcha, snow ice, milk tea, boba, it's all on the list.
You need to try yerba mate real fast.
I've tried that with the fancy straw, right, Eric?
Yeah, you gotta get a yerba mate. It's the drink of choice for We're Not Marketers.
Clara, this is an inside joke we've had in our internal group chat. For whatever reason, yerba mate has become the unofficial drink of choice for you.
Yerba mate!
Lobby something else other yerba mate.
I'm just so
we don't know how it came up, but it's the unofficial drink of choice.
We're trying to get them as a sponsor. That's why.
All right, Clara, this was honestly 45 minutes of some really good stuff from a learning perspective. I got my gut laughing here. So we got a really nice filled cup heading into our weekend. I wanted to ask you, do you have any special projects coming up? Any cool things you'd like our listeners to know about you? And also, where can they just find you and learn more about what you got going on?
Yeah. So where to find me? Definitely find me on LinkedIn. And I'm also on the Compete Network. I have a dedicated podcast called Back Office to Boardroom. So how to break CI out of the back office, creating decks and docs, that deck nerd into the boardroom, and more to come. So definitely check that out around that. I would say in terms of special projects, I'm building out what does it look like to start as a first ever CI practitioner / PMM. What does your resource pack look like to start on day one? There's so many followers who are looking for this. There's also so many incredible thought leaders who've published this out, but no one's really created a tight resource package. So I really want to be the first to market around that. And if anybody wants to contribute, keep me honest. Would love to hear from you.
When is that coming out?
Well, it came up this week, actually, Eric. So I just added it onto the docket as a new strat project.
Hey.
But give me a deadline. I'd say end of month, middle of March. I'd love to drop that.
All right, listeners, if we don't have it by March 15th, everyone pound Clara with requests. All right, we want this. We want this deliverable, and we want it now.
I have tons of templates. I do a lot of customer advisory, prospect advisory, and also most importantly, to pay it forward in the industry. So if you're looking for a walk around deck, a dedicated charter, a governance model, all the fancy words, hit me up.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Clara. I think it was a really impactful episode, and
Yes.
I'm sure our listener will agree with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much
110%.
for having me. It's an honor to be part of the Misfits. I know a lot of our careers don't make sense, but it makes it so much easier when we're all connected as a community. So thank you all for listening and for having me today.
Incredible. Thank you again, Clara.
Clara, thank you for agreeing that we're not marketers. That's another episode. Have a great one, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to We're Not Marketers. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, review our podcast, and share this episode with other PMMs. Thanks again, and see you soon.